Discussion of potential action items. Number 6, natural gas rate study and consideration of 1-year increase. Dan?
I'll introduce Dan while he's coming in. So this item is informational to provide opportunities for questions, discussion, and follow-up. However, for the August 18th meeting, based on the present gas market information, the council would be recommended to approve an increase in natural gas rates by 50% effective September 1st, 2022. This increase will be for 1 year only, allowing gas rates to return to their present level September 1st, 2023, until staff and the City Council have taken further action prior to that date. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Dan to kind of provide kind of some background and why we are here.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I was appreciating Mr. Vosberg's compliments earlier and impressed that someone can make me feel good. At the same time, he's essentially disagreeing with the recommendation. A skilled communicator. I'll make my presentation short. Mr. Vosberg's right, it's a big increase. But the natural gas world in which we're working and buying natural gas is a volatile commodity market. So in my presentation, I'll get into that as I'm moving through this. This is probably 10 minutes. So let's see if I can do this by 7:30. So again, as I shared with you when I was here in November, the gas system has no debt. It's in great condition in that way. Rates, even though substantially increased, will still be lower than PG&E, and I'll show you that if you haven't already seen it in the study. The study is in the council packet. Your gas system's operated safely by your own people, and equally important, you, City Council, have oversight, not the Public Utilities Commission of California. That is a great thing for Coalinga. So you've heard me say this before, natural gas rates were decreased in 2009 and 2011. The city had 10 years of very, very low costs. Wholesale gas cost increased last winter. We did the 45% increase. At that point, as I'll show you in a few minutes, gas costs looked like they were going to decrease, but they did not coming out of winter. So historically, I'm on the reasons for increase slide, Larry. Historically, we've had, as I said, increased high wholesale cost. PG&E cost have been increasing in general, but now we have a new component that has been somewhat of a surprise to the city, and that is PG&E passing through the California Air Resource Board's greenhouse gas cap and trade surcharge. They deemed that the city should be paying that charge after several years, and so that charge has been imposed on the city, and that is now an additional cost that's about $1 an MMBTU. It's not a small cost, but it's not as big as the cost increase of wholesale gas. Moving to the wholesale gas market, as of November 2021, this is the slide I showed you in November of 2021. We had gas prices rebounding because of COVID. We had that freeze in Texas, which demonstrated how volatile gas prices could be. And then we had at that point that gas pipeline explosion. And so when you look at the curve in the next slide, again, I'm showing you the curve as it looked last year. We see that peak, which was last winter, and the projections at that point, and you can see the projections at that point for this coming winter was gas at $5.50. But now as we look at the next slide, you see the new projection. And so for this winter, we're looking at gas at $10. Since I made that slide, the wholesale market has dropped to about $9. And you can see now, in the next winter, we see prices dropping again. So why is this? Russia invaded Ukraine. Natural gas is exportable by liquefaction, by liquefying it to liquefied natural gas. And it's in demand now because of the world price of natural gas. Storage inventories in the country are low, about 10% below average. That's bad news for this coming winter. We need gas storage for winter supply across the country. Low hydro, which is no secret to us here in the West. It's hot this summer across the country, and producers and transporters are hesitant to invest in gas infrastructure because of the environmental concerns around a fossil fuel. So all of these things together are what are causing this huge spike that we're seeing right now. So moving on, the next slide shows the cost components overall for each fiscal year for the gas enterprise in Coalinga. And you can see the initial increase in fiscal 22. The PG&E costs are in red, and that's the impact of the cap and trade surcharge being passed through. And that continues forward. You also see the spike in 22, the year that is over now. That's looking back at last winter for gas costs, and then the larger spike in fiscal 23, and then again dropping back down. The next slide shows Coalinga's utility cost components. So you see the cost in November of 21. With that first increase, the average monthly cost for gas at $32 going to $49 this year. That's over 12 months, so that $49 is going to be higher in the winter and less in the summer. As Sean mentioned in his introduction, in this case, what we will be proposing is an increase that ends, it sunsets exactly a year from now. So staff or with me will be back here with a new recommendation at that point. So moving on, that's the typical profile for a typical residential customer in Coalinga, peaking in the wintertime, 360 therms. If you're the median residential customer in Coalinga, this is what you look like. And I'm showing you this for the purpose of the comparison to PG&E, which is the next slide. So what I did very carefully is I looked back at what a customer in Fresno would pay PG&E over the past 12 months, $728. A customer in Coalinga for that same usage profile, same volume of gas, $352. However, because cost went up, they should have paid $458 because the 45% increase last November wasn't enough. And I'm doing this out of fairness to the comparison. Now for the next 12 months, based on the rate increase that we're talking about now, the 50%, that customer in Coalinga will pay $585. Probably the most important point I can make with this slide is the $585, when the period is over, won't be compared to $728. It'll be some higher number for PG&E because PG&E adjusts its commodity costs monthly. So if gas does cost $10 a decatherm in December, that $728 will be boosted a lot and for other months as well. So it's not that we're proud of being having to raise rates that much, but the good news is that the city is doing a good job. The system is being operated at costs lower than your giant competitor. Let's see where we are. Next slide. This is the rate table, and it's showing the existing rates, 12/1/21, the 50% increase, which will be proposed for September 1st, and the rate and the resolution will have integrated into it the decrease a year later, back to the existing rates. One comment about natural gas compared to sewer and water and refuse is it is exempt from the Prop 218 noticing requirements. So City Council can approve the increase by resolution. It makes it easier. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the rates are proposed to be set after 1 year. Action will be recommended for City Council at the next meeting to provide an opportunity for questions, discussion, and any changes. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, that will be my recommendation to the city and to City Council. For years now, we've been buying gas on the monthly spot market. It would be better now to move to structured gas purchasing. And so what I will propose with staff's support, is structured gas pricing such that you're buying gas in a layered format 1 and 2 and 3 years out. And even though it may look expensive 3 years out, to still do that and thereby avoid the big price spikes like we're seeing right now. We're not trying to beat the market, we're essentially just averaging things out.
Didn't we used to do that? When you first started, isn't that the way we did it?
A very long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
But
I
then
thought
gas
we were
was,
still doing that.
gas was so inexpensive for so long, it just didn't matter. And that has changed. Wow, 10 minutes. So that is the end of my comments. Again, this is for discussion tonight. And do you have any questions?
I have one. It sounds real good that we have a stop date on this, but what happens if gas is still up high at that time?
We're having this discussion again with the rest of the world.
Because we can't guarantee that it's gonna go back down again. And
Well, you can guarantee that we'll be having the discussion again.
Right. Yeah.
No, we
Okay.
can't. City Council, one,
I got a question for you. What would be the difference of doing a smaller rate increase over the next few years to get up to that number that you actually need instead of doing it all at once?
well, with natural gas, unlike water, which you'll hear Sean talk about, we know we are going to incur these costs this winter, and the rate increase covers the actual cost this winter. We don't know how much the gas is going to cost in following winters. The risk would be that if we didn't purposely collect enough money this winter, we were more in the hole next winter because the world continues to be in energy turmoil. So just one comment. So the basis for the 50%, and I didn't say this yet, is to preserve the fund balance at about $1 million, which isn't a huge amount for a natural gas enterprise.
1.4 million, I think it was, wasn't it?
I'm sorry.
How much do we have in excess right now?
Jasmine?
How much?
What's in the rate study? Actually, I have it.
Because even asking people to conserve a little bit would probably help too.
But it's
with some-
natural
with
gas. We're
some of the
talking about
cost.
heating
I know,
houses
but
and.
in the home though.
Yeah, I think you can't really.
If we're overstocked and we already have it, that would prevent us from having to buy as much if we're using less and string it out a little longer and just buy it when it's cheaper.
So, Dan can speak to this, but I think the way that we purchase is that we monitor the market, and as the prices increase and fluctuate, decrease, we try to buy an optimum rate. We hold, for the winter based on, historical demand and historical use, so that we can buy the best purchase for our residents, so we can give them the bigger bang for their buck, because it is something that cannot be
Stored.
stored, or I think you can't really conserve it. I mean, you're asking people to not turn on their heaters in the winter. Like, you know, you could kind of conserve water, but I don't think you can conserve natural gas. I mean, they have to cook and do all that, but.
Hey,
Did you say we buy it monthly?
We buy we buy gas at monthly market prices.
Okay.
That's what we've been doing. But I'm recommending now that we move to structured purchasing. You lock in the price in advance, you don't pay for the gas until you buy it. So it's not like we're having to invest in it.
But that's not, I mean, we're not gonna buy what you're talking about. That's gonna be a little bit, right, before we get to that point where we can make the yearly purchase. In other words, we're not gonna be doing that in the next month or two.
Well, that's another suggestion that I would make, and thank you for bringing that up. Because of the uncertainty with this winter, to start to lock in some prices, layer in, actually I had that in my slides and I skipped it, to layer in purchases for this winter as we move toward winter to avoid even further volatility that may happen. So we can buy a month at a time, for example. We can lock in the price for a month at a time so that the rate increase that I hope you will approve is adequate. And, you know, because if the market went totally crazy, I don't really want to be back here again, and you don't really want to see me or anyone else asking about this again. Back to the fund balance question. The projected fund balance at the end of fiscal 22 was under $900,000. And with the increase, it's just essentially held at $1 million at the end of fiscal 23, the year that we're in now. So it's just holding ground.
So that is the minimum amount that we need to hold as fund balance in any enterprise fund. We can't, so I don't know if Dan elaborated to that. So you have your general fund, which is your governmental fund. That's your discretionary fund. You can do whatever you want with it. You could hold as much as you want in it. You can hold as little as you want in it. However, your enterprise funds, which are your water, your gas, your sewer, your sanitation, they operate much similar to a private business. And so they're a for-profit, actually not a profit to break even. So private businesses operate to maximize profit. So we're in the government industry. Our enterprise funds are considered business-like funds when it comes to generally accounting principles. So what we do is we want to provide the level of service for the most efficient cost. And so that's what Dan is talking about here, and that's what Sean and I have kind of worked with him on that, is we want to provide our residents with the highest amount of service level with the lowest amount of cost. And so when we're projecting these things and Dan's purchasing on behalf, we're trying to purchase out of, and then also kind of going into economics is that supply and demand. So if you're purchasing now, like Dan is saying, and we're locking in those rates, demand is very low right now. Let's say we get down into the winter and demand is high. Obviously the cost is gonna be high. And so because it's a business-like fund, it's a dollar for dollar transfer to the users of those services. And those are our residents. So does that make sense? And like simply put, kind of.
Yeah. Now, a 50% deal for the average consumer, that would be about $13 per household, right?
It was
Or
on
was
that.
it more than that? $15?
Yeah, the difference between now and 33 to 48, 15.
It goes from
Yeah.
10.15 to 15.23, and then in a year, it goes back down to $10.15. That's for regular monthly charge.
To reiterate one point that Jasmine was making, the gas enterprise, the refuge enterprise, water and sewer, they're all businesses that are operating within the city outside of tax-supported functions that you provide. So the goal in operating them as enterprise funds is to be efficient with spending, but at the same time set rates to cover cost. And I say that in the context of concern over people who are on fixed incomes. The responsibility here is to operate these enterprises responsibly. Those other issues need to be handled someplace else and need to be handled. But in the case of the enterprise funds, we have got to keep them whole. In the case of natural gas, we don't have bonds or debt service coverage or bond covenant requirements. That's different with water. So we do have that benefit with natural gas.
Okay, any questions for more?
Is that
Dan?
gonna change our gas service charge our baseline? Is that gonna change that too?
Not the volume, but the way...
No, I mean just baseline to have the service. Is that gonna change that too?
Well, the way I set it up, and you could have input on this, was to increase all three rate components. You can see it in the rate table. All three rate components, the 50%. Another approach would be to leave the fixed monthly cost the same, but then we would be increasing the other components more, because we need 50% overall to cover the projected cost.
You're just evening it out between them all, so that way it's not high on one end versus the other.
That's correct. It's spread out evenly amongst both the fixed monthly charge and the volumetric costs for gas.
And then just something also to add, I've been your finance director for 5.5 years. Want you to know that the Gas Enterprise Fund was the richest fund when I got here. So we had reduced the rates once prior to my arrival. And so we have been chipping away at that reserve. And rather than financing projects that Sean has to do, which he can talk about it too, they have some plans for some capital improvements that need to be done within the enterprise infrastructure. But we had been purposely drawing down, and so rates were purposely lower for residents as opposed to the annual expenses for the fund. So we were providing a subsidy for the Gas Enterprise Fund purposely because we can't carry, because it's an enterprise fund and it's a business-like fund, we can't carry a high reserve in it. Otherwise, it's not taxes, it's user fees. And so we're basically taking the residents' money and holding on to it and using it as our pooled cash. And we can't do that legally. So that's why we were chipping away at it, and took us about 5 years to bring it down to $1 million, which is the minimum that we want to be at.
So they're not taxing any rollover?
Enterprise funds aren't called taxes, they're called user fees. They're subject to Prop 218, which is what Dan is doing and he's been hired to do. We don't call them taxes, they are user fees. They're similar to your water bill that you would pay, like I pay. I live in the city of Fresno, I pay the city of Fresno a water bill. It's a user fee and it's a consumption fee, and there's a baseline fee. City of Fresno provides me sanitation service through the city, and so I pay them a fee, and then I get my gas through PG&E and electricity through PG&E. So Coalinga is very fortunate and it is in a unique situation where the city has acted as an agent and a provider of natural gas, whereas if the city was not doing that for its residents, the residents would be directly paying that money to PG&E, and that cost would be much, much higher because we buy as a city and as a government agency at wholesale price, and we pass that wholesale price on to our residents. And so that's important to recognize. I know nobody likes to, have their rates raised, but it is important for the residents to recognize that we have been providing a subsidy, and that information is all available online on our financial information. You can purposely see that every year that the Gas Enterprise Fund was operating at a deficit because we were purposely drawing down on those high reserves. And so had that not been the case, these rate increases would have happened a long time ago.
Okay.
So you say 1 year.
We don't need a motion tonight, it's just informational, right?
Correct.
And they're gonna bring this back to us. So do you guys have any more questions? Do we have any questions from the audience? Thank you, Dan. Everybody's so quiet now. Okay, next we'll go